that's the real goodness, I think, of having some sort of quote-unquote map for our spiritual journey as disciples of Jesus, is so that you can identify, in this stage of my life right now, what is the invitation of God to me?
Welcome, everyone, to Breaking Bread, the podcast brought to you by Apostolic Christian Counseling and Family Services. Excellent. As always, to have you along, Isaac Funk is up from Peachtree, Georgia. Welcome, Isaac.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
And Arlen's here. We're going to have a conversation about discipleship, which is not all that unfamiliar to our audience and to this podcast. I want to set the conversation up here today, and I could be wrong. In fact, call me out if I am. But I think if you were to take a straw poll on a caricature of a disciple and who should be discipled, I wonder if most imaginations light up with young, immature, beginning starters. Do you think that's pretty close? Do you think that is naturally the caricature of who we think should be discipled? And sometimes I exclude myself in that caricature. I think we're going to push on that a little bit in this conversation and expand that caricature.
I think that's been my experience. If you're looking at, you go to a Christian bookstore, their whatever discipleship section, you're going to find curriculum for beginner Christians or catechisms or something that's going to be walking a new believer through kind of first steps of doctrine and learning something.
Mm-hmm. You know, I have a crazy analogy which may fit or may not fit, but for a brief moment in my life in junior high, I used to run the mile. Mm. And, the mile...
You mean you were that fast? It was just a brief moment? See, when I ran the mile...
A couple times they said, you'll have to do that again. But, it's 4 laps, right? Around most tracks. And there's something about how, like, that first lap, you're feeling okay and you kind of goes well and that kind of thing. And then usually that 4th lap, like you see the end and you can kind of get excited about the last little bit. But that middle section, that 2nd and 3rd lap, it's so easy to just kind of trail off or just kind of get lost in the mundane or doing this again. Same scenery, same thing, not feeling as good, a little bit harder. And the reality is, like, that area right there is where so much gain is made for those who are going to finish strong, right? You can't, you have to keep a pace. You have to you keep your mental focus during that time. And I think there's something here with this discipleship idea. We talk about the initial, and it can come back at the very end, but that middle section, there's still a lot to do.
Well, I like that analogy, Arlen, and I might actually play to it with this comment for all who are real runners out there. But it seems like there's a lot to learn about the start of a race, and there's a lot to say about the end of a race. But what is there to say about the middle of the race, right? Just like, don't stop. But there again would be my ignorance, probably a runner out there saying, no, you're missing it. Like, you got to be thinking about this during the middle of it. That's further to my point. The literature is how to start the race, maybe how to end the race. But what is it in the middle? And now we're talking spiritually, right, Isaac? Does that more to your point?
Yeah. I think it's it's a little bit easier to measure those things, the beginning and the end of it, to your point, right? You can tell when the person sets off, okay, their pace has changed, they're moving now, and you're like, okay, great, but you don't see all the inner workings that's going on with the runner in those middle sections. And I think that's really, to Arlen's point, a really essential aspect of being able to run the race well is, what do you do as you're running?
And so to go to like a spiritual growth analogy, right? The initial start of conversion or a walk with Christ, often you see a lot of very quick, maybe rapid, very evident change of some type.
Obvious
in one
changes.
way, and now they're a different way. And then if you go into the more middle ages of that walk or life or whatever you want to say, there's still a lot of work going on, but it's much deeper, much more internal, much more underneath the surface that really will set up, for a good end. And there's a lot of times, I'm going back to that analogy, there's a lot of times in the 2nd and 3rd lap, and you're like, you know what, I'm going to slow down, or I'm going to stop pushing, or, I'm going to go sit down for a while, and that, again, just think about how that correlates to our own spiritual walk.
Yeah. Isaac, you're really well well read, well researched in this conversation. I'd be interested in your explanation, perhaps putting some words to what we're saying here and what the analogies have been bringing forth. I mean, Christianity has had a long history of charting the Christian's growth. Am I right about that? There has been a great deal of thought put to this. Elevate and bring to the surface some of that conversation.
Yeah, so I think throughout church history, there's always been a large emphasis around baptism for a believer, it seems, and a lot of the learning and the cutting off of like blatant sins and just basic obedience stuff that they're learning and starting a rhythm of disciplines. And as Arlen said already too, and those are pretty easy to measure. You can see that, okay, this person, they're building community, they're getting involved in this group, all of that. And then throughout Christian history, there's been different traditions in the church, different streams of the church that have all had similar language to the kind of these recurring movements of a Christian's life that can happen simultaneously even. One is purification, where you're continuing to like remove kind of these disordered desires or affections that we have in life or attachments we have towards certain things that sometimes overtake our
idols,
our love for God. Idols would be a word for that. Absolutely. So purification, and then illumination, which is really about growing in wisdom and in discernment and practicing that as you grow. I think that's a lot of maybe the middle stage kind of experience. And then union or communion, which is kind of like a deepening of your participation in God's life, being fully content, being loved by Him, and letting that love flow through you to others, into the world around you. And those things, again, it's not like this linear journey that historical Christianity has laid out for us necessarily, but it is kind of like this upward spiral, I've heard it described, where you continue to move through those different, stages, as it were, from different vantage points. And yeah, you just continue to grow into a person who is more like Christ, being conformed to His image, as the Scripture puts it.
I really like those. Illumination, purification, communion. I mean, I think that is the vocabulary, the nuances, the shades that I'm missing in laps 2 and 3 of running speak, right? Like, I don't even know what I should be thinking about, right? Except for just don't stop.
Yeah.
But when you paint with some articulation, as you have done, it really surfaces really, really rich, I would imagine, practices or really rich objectives and benchmarks, right?
Mm-hmm. I think it looks, Scripture will speak to things like, crucifying your affections and lusts, it's this language that you can see, that kind of thing. And I think it goes, so let's use an example. So for example, perhaps you have an issue with anger. That's been kind of a besetting sin or something that, you quickly fall back in. And I think that, the early stages, you maybe start to identify it and you start to kind of maybe get a little bit of a handle on it, by God's grace and whatnot, and maybe less angry to most people than before, or just, more of a pleasant personality or whatever. But there's a lot of stuff underneath the surface, which goes, I think, to that purification type piece. That's the affections and lust. Like, what's driving that? Anger is a secondary emotion. What's underneath there? What's the frustration? Why is that frustration being caused? What are the stories we're telling ourselves? What are the lies we are believing? What are the entitlements that we are allowing ourselves? That if we go through the hard work of working into those things, purifying those things, illuminating them, bringing them to light, then you start to kind of work at the root level. And if you don't, you'll be at that, status quo for the rest of your life. But if you do, it takes you to a deeper and deeper fulfillment in the fullness of Christ. Mm-hmm. Again, that's the language you just see scattered throughout the Scriptures of those type of discussions.
Yeah, and just to put some flesh on that, I can think of an experience in my life when, a lot of my Christian journey was like behavior management for me, and just making sure I wasn't doing the wrong things and I was doing the right things, and just choosing those over and over again. And I remember going to a conference, and and it was a Christian conference. And the way that they spoke about just living freely in the love of Christ and just so unhindered by anxiety, by anger, by lust, by greed, by pride and being driven to have like this just perfect image or impact even on the world, productivity. Anyway, like freedom from all of that. And they acted like it was so accessible to the Christian, and they would use, they bring out the things that Jesus himself would say, and you could look at the Sermon on the Mount. It's very much about this heart-level freedom and change, which I just remember being so compelled leaving that conference, being like, man, like I want that. And I didn't even know necessarily that it was like that kind of freedom was being offered to me. And I didn't even know how to necessarily walk there, even after, or walk into that necessarily, even after leaving that conference. But there was just some pull there that like, there's got to be more to following Jesus than just not doing wrong things.
Your vision was expanded.
And doing right things.
Your vision was expanded.
That's right.
In that moment. But I want to go back to that time where it was behavioral management. Would you say that was where you needed to be during those years, or so I want you to speak a little bit about that so we understand that well.
Yeah, I do want to be clear about that. I mean, that is part of it. That's the starting point. Is it does look like sometimes you just got to like cut off the stuff that is going to be destructive in your life and in the lives of people around you, and start doing things that are going to set you up for kind of this long haul maybe. So
even in that explanation, we can see then that this growth then takes some form and some shape, right? That's where you needed to be at. Behavioral management at some level, maybe we'll call it a stage. At that stage, you needed to be there, but you're not there now, and you needed to mature beyond it. Am I thinking well?
Yeah, and that's the real goodness, I think, of having some sort of quote unquote map for our spiritual journey as disciples of Jesus, is not so that there's some sort of hierarchy in terms of Christians, but so that you can identify in this stage of my life right now, what is the invitation of God to me? Okay, so I've just started this out. The invitation is to put off and put on.
Yeah.
And there will be other invitations in other stages of my life that will come to me just as a matter of taking on more responsibility, a spouse, children, a job, ministry, all these things. And there will be different invitations in each of those stages or seasons of life.
And when you say invitations, I think I know what you mean.
Right. Invitations from God he's saying, hey, step into, there's something here, there's some sense of my deepening life in you here that is going to be possible, where you can become more a person of love, less a person of anxiety, less a person of ego-driven of living.
And the way that you're putting it, it sounds like there's an invitation out to me if I should see it and receive it. I think that's the challenge that I'm hearing in this moment, Isaac, is it sounds to me like you've just given a picture of God as one who invites us into deeper. Should we know that the invitation is there in our mailbox? And should we accept it?
No, Isaac, you use the terms put off, put on, right? So go to that Ephesians passage where it speaks about Ephesians 4. It says, put off the old man, which is corrupt according to deceitful lust, and put on the new man, right? But in the middle there, it said, and be renewed in your spirit of your mind, right? Put off, be renewed, and then put on. And I think that being renewed is a little bit of this ongoing that we are talking about, where our vision is being expanded, it's being broadened. We're realizing that there's more opportunity, and that's a spiritual work. It's a work of the Holy Spirit within us. But it's an invitation, like you said, to step into that, to really go to those deeper levels.
There's something really, I think, compelling about being able to see and foresee growth. Okay, so now let me use this story. I was an educator teaching, and I was taught something really important by a sixth grade teacher. And the sixth grade teacher said, if you want to motivate sixth graders, tell them that you are preparing them to be seventh graders. That's how you do it. because every sixth grader wants to be a seventh grader. And that was really helpful for me because I was teaching kids and I was telling them about way out there, like you're going to be able to have a job.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm missing that on a kid.
Yeah.
Because they don't even really want a job, but they do want to be a seventh grader if they're a sixth grader, and they want to be an eighth grader if they're a seventh grader. And that just has come to me in this conversation, which is really kind of interesting. If we're running the middle laps, sometimes that motivation is lacking because we don't know what the next step is, the next stage. What should I be growing into? Does that make sense? Now, I don't want to at all come across like, Christlikeness is that end goal, and that's beautiful and motivating. But there is something about, as you go into your illustration there, Arlen, what if I learned about what's driving my anger? Yeah. Is that the next step for me? Now, that's really helpful.
It has to be attainable, to your point, Matt. The next step has to be be able to be visioned and attainable, or else we end up in these places which are all really good. And we say, Christ has called us into the abundant life and we are to become more like him and those kind of things. But they stay out there in this realm of, well, to use your earlier example, you'll get a job someday, or you'll be a really, good college student someday. That's too far out there. So I like what you're being there, and that's why I think it's so hard. Again, to use that running example, in the second and third laps, it just starts to all blend together, and you can't see the finish line. In fact, you see it and you pass it, and you start the next lap again, and you have to offer a level of close, attainable. What's the next step?
I think it's kind of interesting too, as you're talking about this, I'm thinking about my own experience as a younger believer. And I think I had huge plans for my life. I think I wanted, like, I was going to go be the next Jim Elliott or something, and really make impact, and not knowing exactly how that was going to happen, but really desiring that. And I think I did kind of explored paths that I thought might take me down that route. But I think as I have now entered into my middle years, and I'm at the beginning stages of my middle years, and I've realized this is kind of how things are landing.
Did Arlen call them Middle Ages? Middle Ages? Kind of like the Dark Ages?
They're kind of like the Dark Ages.
Welcome, Isaac. A little history
Welcome
analogy.
to the Dark Ages.
A little analogy there.
Was that Freudian? I don't know what they call it.
We caught his meaning. Yeah, I did anyway. It struck way too close to home. I'm sorry. I digress.
No. Yeah, that's kind of the experience, because you're kind of like, okay, this is what my life is turning out to be, and it's not exactly how I anticipated it.
Yeah,
and it's good, and it's there's so much grace in it and all of that. But my point is that the invitations now of God to me in my discipleship journey are just what's in front of me. Actually, it is what is exactly. It's in my marriage, and it's with my kids, and it's with the job, the role that I've been given, is where I have to ask these questions that I think any mature believer who wants to grow would ask is, like, where am I still grasping for control over something that I don't have control over? Or where am I avoiding some truth? Or where do I need repair in a relationship? I think in marriage, somebody who is working through this is realizing I can't love my spouse as they are, because I realized I had an idealized picture of them. Okay. And so the invitation in that stage is I have to surrender, release this idealized version of what my marriage would look like, and just receive what it is to me and work within that. Or as a parent, like I am attached to the validation, the approval of my children. And so I am anxious and I am controlling, and just recognizing that truth about you and surrendering that. Or in my work or my ministry.
Wait till they get older, Isaac, and you start to vicariously through them, wanting them to do what you could not and do it better than you know what I mean?
And so, therein comes
joy.
Therein comes the invitation. It's it's what comes through all of these. It's what comes through dealing with loss, suffering, limitation. All of those things become the doorways that God is saying, okay, here's where you can walk through to grow my life deeper in you.
And here you see the beautiful complexity of the Christian walk, that all of those steps are harder than we ever want them to be, right? It is a hard thing, just like, again, that mile example, running in those second and third laps and not slowing down and just keeping pace is harder and harder and harder. But it's also more beautiful. The fruit from it, the result from it, as you just faithfully continue on one step after a time, the beautiful fruit that comes from it is richer than we can ever imagine.
Well, I appreciate that casting that vision and the beauty of it, because I love the list that you just gave, Isaac. And I think some of the reaction we have when you talk through all that is, that's too good to be true. Right? For me to really let go of control, you mean for me to really accept my circumstances and be good with them? You mean for me to really live in a place of joy? Like, yeah, right? So I love that. I love that. How does a person step into it then? What does it look like, Isaac, for a person, I think, to look at their stage and say, okay, this is my world. The invitation is out for me. Should I accept and step into it? Mm-hmm. What does the stepping into it look like?
Yeah. Well, let me just I'll back up just very slightly to step into it then further. I've heard that scene from John 21 between Peter and Jesus used a lot to kind of demonstrate or illustrate this, where basically Peter follows Jesus as a young man, clothes himself, goes where he wants, has a whole lot of agency.
Yeah.
And then Jesus like, and then you're going to grow old and somebody else is going to clothe you and they're going to lead you by the hand where you would rather not go. And I think that's kind of the picture that we have of, we don't even always understand where it's going to lead us. We won't always understand 2-3 steps down the line, but all we see sometimes is what is that one step in front of me. And so I think a lot of times when we understand, oh, this is kind of a pain point in my life right now, this, whatever that limitation, loss, whatever disillusionment is. And sometimes it just looks like finding like a wise, trusted person being like, hey, I just need to tell you the truth about whatever this is in me or what I'm going through. And sometimes I think that it opens the doorway is because you've brought somebody else into it to be a companion along this journey with you. Honestly, I think that's a pretty important part of kind of these middle stages of discipleship is having a very close companion beside you to help walk out in some of that ambiguity. And then it could look like that, and it could be like, man, you know what? I really regret this relationship with this person, my family, my kid, this person at church, like what this looks like, what I've done, and that's maybe just weighing on you. It's like I'm going to step out and just have a conversation with this person and seek repairing and restoration in this relationship, and you just see where that goes. And what you do is you just entrust it to God's leading. Lead me where I would. It's not even that you would even want to do it or go through hard, but you're willing to let God lead it.
It is the same resemblance of that early stage discipleship of confession and repentance. Isn't that what you just explained? Which I think is actually very, very helpful. Okay, as we run the Middle Ages, right? We still follow the shape and form of confession and repentance into Christlikeness.
And I think that is just so often, it's just missing in too many places, just the opportunity for it. We have a nice kind of system for it for a new convert. Yeah, you go and you meet with your elder and you confess, right? And you tell them what. But as time goes on, we just don't have places for that oftentimes in our lives. Like, where do we go to just tell? And I'm not talking about like gross sins or anything like that even necessarily, but although that's important too, but even beyond that, like I just want to tell you some of my weakness. Or like, man, I'm going to tell you, I've been struggling with my ego at work or in my ministry. Like someone who we can just tell the truth to, I think is so important.
And instead, isolation becomes such kind of a natural companion in itself. And what you said is, and it is so true, if you have someone alongside you that you trust, that you're able to be open and honest with, it makes the journey, it makes the running, it makes the path so much better. And that's part of that process, is to step into it. It's why community is so important in a discipleship journey. It's a critical component of that.
Yeah.
I mean, I know why it's hard. I know why it's hard in the Middle Ages, because you mentioned the gross sins. It's harder. It's hard to confess. I was just at a meeting this morning, and I felt competition come. And as I was sitting there, I was like, why am I feeling competitive right now?
Right.
Why am I trying to find the mistake or the error or the other side of the story? What's going on? You know what I mean? I felt like, and that type of that's kind of a hard thing to do. Is to look at a person and say, I'm feeling pretty competitive against you right now, right? The point is, sometimes when it's petty, it's even more embarrassing. So anyway,
But it's more of the depth. It's more of the depth of the fullness of who we are that's being conformed into the image of Christ. That's one thing I think why this becomes so countercultural, is we are surrounded by messages of ease and quickness and stories of the victories and that kind of thing, and we lose sight of the ongoing, difficult, hard, continued mundane that leads towards those things. We like to celebrate, being on the podium after it's all over, and we forget the hours and hours of training with very little visible progress that allows that to happen. But it's such a beautiful thing if we can embrace it and step into it and encourage each other along that path.
I think part of that too might be, you talked about kind of the society or the culture that we're in. And I think we so value productivity and impact, and kind of the implicit message, I think, I must increase so Christ can increase. That's kind of the implicit messaging that comes to us through that, rather than I must decrease so he can increase, or he must increase, so I must decrease.
Right.
And I think because we put so much value on just being seen as valuable, productive, that it's really scary to do anything that might cause people to think, not all that I thought that he was or she was.
I've chased it down. It's easier to say I did a thing and I shouldn't have. It's harder to say I am this type of person and I shouldn't be.
Yeah.
And I think that's the repentance of middle age.
Yeah. Let's just sit with that for a minute. Like, I think that needs to be heard, yeah. Oh, I heard a story just recently of, you remember Mike Tyson and the boxer. I can't remember the name of the guy's ear he bit off. Do you remember his? Anyway,
we've got it. Let's just right now Google it. Somebody's. I don't want to hear how I didn't.
Sean to get on that. No, so whoever it was, like he, in the interviews afterwards, I think Mike Tyson was just kind of like, oh, I don't know, just came over to me like lapse of judgment sort of thing. Did you find it? What's his name?
Evander Holyfield.
Holyfield.
He deserved to be mentioned in this, Holyfield.
Your ear.
Yeah, he deserves it. And yeah, he kind of was talking about like this, I don't know what happened. But the reality is like what happened in the ring was who Mike Tyson was. He was the kind of person who, when pushed to that extent, would bite an ear off of a person. And that's not, I'm not coming down on Mike Tyson. What I'm doing is coming down on us, saying like we are also that person. When we are pushed to those edges of ourselves, what we do reveals, or how we react to disagreement, pain, loss, whatever, reveals in a much deeper part of us than we otherwise would be able to see. And so, yeah, the thing is, it's not just what I did, but it's actually, I am this kind of a person who would do something like that.
Yeah.
Christ said it, right? He said, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks, right? So what's inside will come out. And that's the thing I think sometimes we forget, that he didn't come just to make us, as one author said, nice people. He came to make us new men and new women, right? Conformed so that we are him.
And that was the beauty that I was sensing at that conference I mentioned, was like, wow, what an amazing opportunity to be revealed for who we are, not that God would just leave us in that state, but that he would remake me. But he can't remake us if we're unrevealed. He cannot heal what is hidden, and so a lot of that middle stage is taking what is hidden and getting that revealed to ourselves first and foremost, because oftentimes that's where it's most hidden, but then also to other people,
so that we can finish the race strong.
Man, so I started with this caricature of who the disciple is, right? And I just think through this conversation, right, has been so redefined, and that we all are in desperate need, right, of a disciple. We all are, right? And I think that's a really important message to capture. Thank you, Arlen. Thanks, Isaac, for sharing. I think when you put it that way, you see how discipleship is just so much a part of the good news of Christ, that he not only gets us off and started and finishes it, but in those middle laps, grows us in purpose, right? In really, really beautiful ways. And to our listeners, thanks for listening. May we accept the invitation that God has placed in front of us in whatever stage we're in to grow more into his likeness. You might be interested that ACCFS is putting on a discipleship conference in Bloomington, Illinois on April 18th. Registration is open. You can find that at our website. It's going to focus on this topic of discipleship across the lifespan. If that is of interest to you, we would be glad to see you there.